The Lost Civilization. Beneath Antarctica. 750,000 years of hidden history. What if I told you that beneath 2 miles of Antarctic ice lies a secret so profound it could rewrite everything we believe about human history? Close your eyes and imagine this. In the endless white expanse of Antarctica, where winds howl across ancient glaciers and temperatures plunge beyond imagination, something waits in the darkness below. In 2019, a routine ice drilling operation struck metal where none should exist. Not rock, not sediment, but engineered structures buried deeper than the pyramids are tall. The discovery was quietly classified, but the truth has a way of surfacing like breath in winter air. For 750,000 years, this frozen continent has guarded its deepest secret, an entire civilization that mastered technologies we're only beginning to dream of. They understood something about time, about cycles, about the very nature of consciousness itself that we've forgotten. Tonight, as you settle into the quiet comfort of your rest, let your mind drift southward to that pristine wilderness where the aurora dances across star-filled skies. There, beneath layers of ice older than memory, quantum crystals still pulse with stored knowledge, waiting patiently for the day when humanity is ready to remember who we really are. The story begins in silence, as all the most important stories do. The morning of November 15, 2019, started like any other for Dr. Caleb Rodriguez and his ice core drilling team in Antarctica's Transantarctic Mountains. The wind howled across the frozen landscape as their massive drilling rig churned steadily downward, extracting cylindrical samples of ancient ice that held secrets spanning millions of years. At 2.7 kilometers deep, deeper than most skyscrapers are tall, the drill bit should have continued its relentless journey through compressed snow and ice. Instead, it struck something that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Metal. Not the occasional meteorite fragment they sometimes encountered, but something vast, structured, and impossible. The drilling equipment's sensors registered a hollow space beyond the metallic barrier, and ground-penetrating radar revealed the unthinkable. Geometric patterns stretching for kilometers in every direction beneath the ice. "This can't be right," Rodriguez whispered as he stared at the readouts, his breath forming clouds in the sub-zero air. The data showed perfectly aligned corridors, symmetrical chambers, and architectural features that defied everything they understood about Antarctica's geological history. This continent had been frozen solid for millions of years, long before humans had even learned to make tools, let alone construct massive underground complexes. Yet there it was, buried beneath 2.5 kilometers of ice, undeniable evidence of deliberate construction, of intelligence, of a civilization that shouldn't exist. But what Rodriguez and his team had stumbled upon would challenge far more than their understanding of Antarctica. Within hours, the discovery site transformed from a routine research camp into something resembling a military operation. Dr. Rodriguez found himself on encrypted satellite calls with officials whose names carried weight in corridors of power he'd never imagined entering. The initial excitement of scientific discovery quickly gave way to a creeping unease as black SUVs arrived across the frozen landscape, carrying men and women in dark suits who spoke in measured tones about national security implications. The structures beneath the ice weren't small. Advanced ground-penetrating radar revealed a complex spanning over 200 square kilometers, roughly the size of Washington, D.C., featuring corridors that ran perfectly straight for kilometers, chambers large enough to house aircraft hangars, and geometric patterns so precise they seemed machine-tooled. The architecture defied explanation. How could such massive construction exist beneath ice that geological records indicated had been frozen solid for millions of years? Dr. Sarah Rodriguez, Caleb's wife and the team's chief geologist, stared at the 3D mapping displays with growing disbelief. "These readings suggest the structures are not only intact but sealed," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The metal composition shows no signs of corrosion, despite being buried for what should be an impossible length of time." But perhaps most disturbing of all was what the deep core analysis revealed about the ice itself. evidence that would soon force everyone involved to question the very foundations of human history. The ice cores told a story that made no scientific sense. Layer upon layer of perfectly preserved atmospheric data stretched back through time. But at the exact depth where the metallic structures began, something extraordinary had occurred. Dr. James Whitfield, the team's atmospheric physicist, discovered isotopic signatures indicating a rapid freeze event. Not the gradual accumulation expected over millennia, but a flash freezing that had occurred in a matter of hours. "Look at these cellular structures," Sarah Rodriguez called out, pointing to microscopic samples under high magnification. Embedded within the ice were perfectly preserved organic materials, leaves, pollen, even insects that belonged to temperate climates. These weren't the hardy organisms you'd expect in Antarctica. They were tropical species that should never have existed on this frozen continent. The implications were staggering. Either the samples were contaminated, which seemed impossible given their depth and the sterile drilling procedures, or Antarctica hadn't always been the frozen wasteland they knew today. The evidence suggested that at some point in the distant past, this land had been warm enough to support lush vegetation and complex ecosystems. But there was something else in those ice samples, something that made the classified reports even more extraordinary. Microscopic analysis revealed traces of refined metals and synthetic compounds that matched no known natural processes. It was as if an advanced technological civilization had been flash-frozen along with the tropical landscape, preserved in crystal-clear ice for hundreds of thousands of years. The leaked documents would later reveal what happened next, and why the discovery was immediately buried under layers of governmental secrecy. Within 72 hours of the initial discovery, the Rodriguez research team found themselves bound by non-disclosure agreements so comprehensive they couldn't even discuss their work with their own families. Official reports were sanitized, funding was quietly redirected, and the drilling site was declared a restricted geological survey zone under international Antarctic treaty provisions. But secrets have a way of surfacing, especially when they challenge the very foundation of human understanding. In late 2023, leaked documents began appearing on secure servers, classified reports that painted a picture far more extraordinary than anyone had imagined. The structures weren't just architectural marvels, they were part of a vast technological complex that showed signs of having been actively maintained until the moment of the Great Freeze. Most shocking of all were the references to what the classified reports called information storage matrices, crystalline structures found within the metallic frameworks that appeared to contain data. Not carved symbols or written records, but something far more sophisticated. Quantum-level information storage that operated on principles beyond our current scientific understanding. Dr. Caleb Rodriguez, speaking off the record months later, would describe the moment he first realized what they had found. "We weren't just looking at ruins. We were looking at a library, a repository of knowledge from a civilization that had achieved things we're only beginning to dream of. But to understand what that knowledge contained, we must venture deeper into the mystery, where quantum crystals hold secrets that stretch across 750,000 years, and where the very nature of information storage challenges everything we thought we knew about the limits of technology." 3 weeks after the initial discovery, Dr. Isabel Crawford found herself standing in what could only be described as impossible. The underground chamber, accessed through a carefully melted shaft in the ice, stretched beyond the reach of their most powerful floodlights. But it wasn't the vast architecture that took her breath away. It was what lined the walls. Thousands upon thousands of crystalline structures, each roughly the size of a dinner plate, were embedded in metallic frameworks that pulsed with a faint rhythmic glow. The crystals themselves seemed to shift and change as she watched, their internal structure reorganizing in patterns too complex for the human eye to follow. Dr. Crawford, a quantum physicist who had spent her career studying theoretical information storage, recognized immediately that she was looking at something that shouldn't exist. "The electromagnetic signatures are off the charts," reported Dr. Austin Wells, the team's chief engineer, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "These crystals are generating coherent quantum fields that remain stable at room temperature. That should be impossible. Quantum coherence typically breaks down within nanoseconds outside of laboratory conditions. But here, in this ancient chamber buried beneath kilometers of Antarctic ice, the impossible had become routine. The crystals weren't just stable, they were active, responding to the presence of the research team with subtle changes in their luminescence patterns, as if acknowledging that after countless millennia of silence, they finally had an audience once again. What the team would discover next would challenge the very foundations of human understanding about information, consciousness, and the true scope of technological achievement. The breakthrough came when Dr. Crawford noticed that the crystals responded to specific electromagnetic frequencies. Working with Dr. Wells, she began broadcasting carefully modulated signals across the spectrum, watching as the crystalline matrices shifted and pulsed in response. At precisely 432.7 terahertz, a frequency that corresponded to theoretical calculations about quantum information transfer, something extraordinary happened. The air above the crystals began to shimmer, and suddenly the chamber filled with three-dimensional holographic projections that defied belief. Not crude light displays, but incredibly detailed, translucent images that seemed to possess depth and substance. Dr. Zoe Patterson, the team's archaeologist, gasped as she found herself surrounded by what appeared to be historical records, projected in mid-air with stunning clarity. "These aren't just storage devices," Crawford whispered, her scientific training warring with the evidence before her eyes. "They're quantum computers operating on principles we haven't even theorized yet. The information isn't stored in binary code or even traditional quantum states. It's embedded in the molecular vibration patterns of the crystal lattice itself." The holographic displays showed timelines that stretched impossibly far into the past. Rulers and civilizations spanning periods of time that made recorded human history seem like a brief footnote. Names and dates flickered through the projection. Leaders who governed for 15,000 years, 32,000 years, even 85,000 years. The total span of recorded history displayed before them covered 750,000 years of continuous civilization. But the most unsettling revelation was yet to come. One that would force them to confront the possibility that everything they understood about human technological development was fundamentally wrong. Dr. Crawford's hands trembled as she ran quantum analysis on the crystalline structures. The data streaming across her tablet defied every principle of modern physics she had spent decades mastering. These weren't just advanced storage devices. They were operating computers that had maintained quantum coherence for hundreds of thousands of years without any external power source or maintenance. "Look at this molecular architecture," she called to Dr. Wells, her voice tight with amazement. "The crystals are self-repairing. They're using ambient electromagnetic energy from the Earth's magnetic field to maintain structural integrity and continue processing information. We don't have technology that can do this today, let alone create it." The holographic timelines continued to unfold around them, showing detailed records of rulers whose lifespan stretched across millennia. But it wasn't just the duration that shocked them. It was the sophistication of the record-keeping. Each entry contained not just names and dates, but complex data about governance, technological achievements, astronomical observations, and what appeared to be detailed genetic information about the rulers themselves. Dr. Patterson studied the floating displays with growing fascination. These records suggest a continuous civilization that understood principles of genetics, astronomy, and quantum physics that we're only beginning to grasp. But if this is accurate, where are they? What happened to a civilization capable of creating technology that surpasses our current capabilities? The answer lay deeper in the quantum matrices, in records that spoke of cycles, of great changes, and of preparations for something the ancient civilization knew was coming. Something that would require them to preserve their knowledge for those who would find it hundreds of millennia later. As the team delved deeper into the quantum data, a chilling realization began to emerge. The technology they were witnessing wasn't just advanced, it was deliberately designed to outlast cataclysm. The crystalline matrices had been engineered with one primary purpose: to preserve crucial information across vast spans of time through conditions that would destroy any conventional storage medium. Dr. Crawford's voice was barely above a whisper as she read the translated data streaming across her screens. These aren't historical records in the traditional sense. They're survival instructions. The entire quantum library appears to be a comprehensive guide for rebuilding civilization after what they called the Great Polar Shift. The holographic displays showed detailed technical specifications for technologies that could harness planetary magnetic fields, manipulate gravitational forces, and even influence the Earth's rotational dynamics. But interwoven with these technological blueprints were warnings. Urgent messages about cyclical planetary events that occurred with mathematical precision every 750,000 years. Dr. Wells studied the energy signatures emanating from the crystals with growing unease. The quantum matrices are still actively processing data. They're not just displaying stored information, they're calculating, predicting, preparing for something. Look at these countdown sequences embedded in the quantum code. The most disturbing element wasn't what the ancient civilization had achieved, but what they had known was coming. The record spoke of a recurring cataclysm so devastating that it required the complete preservation of knowledge for future discovery. And according to the quantum calculations still running after hundreds of millennia, that cyclical event was approaching once again. But to understand the true nature of this impending catastrophe, we must examine the geological evidence that supports the ancient warnings, evidence of a planetary transformation so sudden and complete that it flash froze an entire continent in mere hours. Dr. Melody Harper stood transfixed before the holographic display, watching as the quantum tablets revealed their most terrifying secret. The ancient record spoke of something called the Great Polar Shift, an event so catastrophic that it defied comprehension. This wasn't the gradual magnetic pole reversal that modern science had documented. This was something far more devastating. A complete reorientation of Earth's rotational axis that occurred in a matter of hours. The data is showing a 23-degree axial shift, whispered Dr. Finn Lawson, the team's chief geologist, his voice barely audible in the crystalline chamber. That would explain everything. The flash-frozen ecosystems, the perfectly preserved cellular structures, the tropical forests buried beneath miles of ice. This entire continent was shifted from a temperate zone to the polar region in less than a day. The holographic records displayed the event with horrifying clarity. A planet-wide catastrophe that had flash-frozen an entire civilization along with their technology. But what made Dr. Harper's blood run cold wasn't just the scope of the destruction. It was the mathematical precision with which the ancient civilization had documented the cyclical nature of these events. The quantum tablets showed irrefutable evidence that the Great Polar Shift occurred with clockwork regularity every 750,000 years, triggered by complex gravitational interactions between Earth, the Sun, and the galactic center. And according to the calculations still running in the crystalline matrices, the next event was no longer a distant threat. It was an approaching reality. But the most shocking discovery lay not in the records themselves, but in the physical evidence that surrounded them. Deep beneath the Antarctic ice, Dr. Harper and her team found themselves walking through what could only be described as a frozen Eden. The excavation tunnels had revealed massive tree trunks, some over 6 feet in diameter, perfectly preserved with their cellular structure intact. These weren't the hardy conifers you might expect to find in a cold climate. They were tropical hardwoods, mahogany, teak, and species that belonged in rainforests thousands of miles away. Dr. Celia Monroe, the team's paleobotanist, knelt beside a perfectly preserved fern frond, its delicate structure so pristine that individual cells were visible under magnification. "This is impossible," she breathed, her scientific training warring with the evidence before her eyes. These specimens show no signs of decay, no cellular breakdown that you'd expect from gradual freezing. They were flash-frozen so rapidly that ice crystals didn't have time to form and rupture the cell walls. The tunnels revealed layer upon layer of tropical ecosystem, flowering plants still in bloom, fruits hanging from branches, even insects caught mid-flight and preserved in crystalline perfection. Carbon dating of the organic material consistently returned results that defied explanation. Yeah, 50,000 years old, exactly matching the timeline indicated by the quantum tablets. But perhaps most disturbing were the structures they found interwoven with the forest, buildings, pathways, and technological installations that showed no signs of preparation for catastrophe. The ancient civilization had been going about their daily lives when the shift occurred. Their tropical paradise transformed into a polar wasteland in the span of a few hours. The evidence painted a picture of devastation so sudden and complete that it challenged everything modern science understood about planetary mechanics. Dr. Lawson pored over the geological data with the intensity of a man trying to solve a puzzle that could redefine physics itself. The rock strata beneath the frozen ecosystem told a story that no textbook had prepared him for. Core samples revealed magnetic orientation patterns that had shifted dramatically. Not gradually over millennia, but instantaneously, as if the entire planet had been grabbed by an invisible hand and rotated. "Look at these magnetite crystals," he called to Dr. Harper, pointing to microscopic samples under high magnification. They show dual orientation, the original magnetic alignment from 750,000 years ago, and then a sudden reorientation that occurred in less than 6 hours. The crystal structure actually records the speed of the change. The quantum tablets had provided the theoretical framework, but the physical evidence was even more compelling. Sediment layers showed the telltale signs of massive tidal waves that had swept across continents as the oceans responded to the sudden axial shift. Yet these weren't random geological events. They followed patterns that suggested a predictable, cyclical phenomenon driven by forces beyond Earth's immediate environment. Dr. Munro discovered the most chilling evidence in the preserved stomach contents of flash-frozen animals, tropical fruits, and vegetation, partially digested, proving that these creatures had been living in a warm climate just hours before their bodies were locked in ice for nearly 1,000,000 years. The ancient civilization hadn't just witnessed the great polar shift. They had predicted it, prepared for it, and somehow found a way to preserve their most crucial knowledge for the survivors who would eventually emerge from the aftermath. But their warnings carried an urgent message that made the research team's blood run cold. The final holographic sequences from the quantum tablets revealed the most disturbing truth of all. The ancient civilization had not only survived previous polar shifts, they had learned to calculate them with terrifying precision. Their records showed a clear pattern. Every 750,000 years, the complex gravitational dance between Earth, the Sun, and our galaxy's supermassive black hole reached a critical resonance point that destabilized the planet's rotational axis. Dr. Harper's voice cracked as she read the translated data aloud to her team. According to their calculations, we're currently in the final phase of the 750,000-year cycle. The gravitational anomalies they used as predictive markers, increased volcanic activity, magnetic pole acceleration, specific astronomical alignments, they're all manifesting now. The quantum tablets contain detailed astronomical observations showing how the ancient civilization had tracked these cosmic cycles across multiple polar shifts. They had witnessed the destruction and rebirth of civilizations, each time preserving and rebuilding their knowledge base. But this time, their message carried unprecedented urgency. The approaching shift would be more severe than any in recorded cyclical history. Dr. Lawson studied the geological projections with mounting dread. They're not just warning us about the polar shift itself. These calculations suggest that our modern technological civilization, with its electromagnetic infrastructure, satellite networks, and nuclear facilities, would amplify the catastrophic effects exponentially. The ancient warnings were clear. The technology that had made the current civilization possible could also ensure its complete annihilation. But within the quantum matrices lay something even more remarkable. Blueprints for technologies that could theoretically survive and perhaps even influence the coming transformation. The question was no longer whether humanity could prevent the great polar shift, but whether we possessed the wisdom to understand and implement technologies that existed far beyond our current scientific paradigms. Dr. Pierce Valdez stood in what could only be described as an impossible laboratory. his 30 years of theoretical physics training crumbling before his eyes. The machinery that lined the crystalline chamber operated on principles that challenged every fundamental law he had spent his career defending. Gravity manipulation devices hummed quietly in defiance of Einstein's general relativity, while crystalline computers processed quantum calculations at speeds that made the world's most advanced supercomputers look like pocket calculators. "This can't be real," he whispered, his hands trembling as he approached a device that seemed to bend space-time around itself. The object, roughly the size of a refrigerator, was generating a localized gravitational field so precise that water droplets hung suspended in perfect geometric patterns around its perimeter. Dr. Nova Kessler, the MIT quantum mechanics specialist who had been flown in for independent verification, shook her head in disbelief as she studied the readouts from her instruments. "Pierce, I've run these measurements 17 times. This technology is generating stable micro-wormholes in space-time. We don't even have theoretical frameworks for how this could be possible, let alone the engineering capability to build it." The most disturbing aspect wasn't just that the technology worked, it was that it had been working continuously for 750,000 years without any apparent maintenance or external power source. The devices were drawing energy directly from Earth's magnetic field using conversion methods that violated the conservation of energy as modern physics understood it. But what truly challenged their sanity was the realization that this was only the beginning of what the ancient civilization had achieved. Dr. Kessler's voice was barely steady as she contacted her colleagues at CERN via encrypted satellite link. "You need to see this data," she told Dr. Orion Blackwell, the particle physics division head. "I'm transmitting electromagnetic field measurements that show stable manipulation of the Higgs field, the fundamental field that gives matter its mass. This technology is literally editing the basic properties of reality at the quantum level." The energy systems were perhaps the most incomprehensible aspect of the ancient technology. Crystalline matrices drew power directly from Earth's magnetic field, but not through any conventional electromagnetic induction. Instead, they seemed to be tapping into what Dr. Valdez could only describe as dimensional membrane fluctuations, accessing energy from sources that existed parallel to our observable universe. "Look at these power output readings," Dr. Kessler called out, her instruments detecting energy signatures that defied measurement. "A single crystalline node is generating more sustained power than our largest nuclear reactors, with zero radioactive byproducts and no fuel consumption. The efficiency ratings are literally impossible according to thermodynamic laws." Dr. Blackwell's verification team arrived within 48 hours, bringing with them the most sophisticated detection equipment available to modern science. Their independent analysis confirmed what the initial team had discovered. The technology was not only real and functional, but it was operating on principles that suggested a complete understanding of unified field theory. The theory of everything that had eluded humanity's greatest minds for over a century. The implications were staggering, but the most disturbing question remained unanswered. How had an ancient civilization achieved technological mastery that modern humanity was still centuries away from understanding? The scientific community's response to the leaked reports was predictably divided between wonder and outright denial. Dr. Valdez found himself defending evidence that challenged the very foundations of physics before increasingly hostile peer review panels. "You're asking us to believe that fundamental constants of the universe can be manipulated," accused Dr. Ruth Grayson, a prominent theoretical physicist at Stanford. "This violates everything we know about conservation laws." But the evidence was irrefutable. The ancient devices continued to operate with mathematical precision, their effects measurable and repeatable under controlled conditions. Dr. Blackwell's team had documented gravitational lensing effects around the devices that matched predictions for exotic matter manipulation, theoretical concepts that mainstream physics claimed were impossible to achieve. "The crystalline computers are the most disturbing discovery," Dr. Kessler confided to her research journal. "They're not just processing quantum calculations. They're interfacing with what appears to be parallel dimensional matrices. The computational power suggests they're accessing processing capabilities from alternate versions of reality itself." The technology implied a level of scientific understanding that made current human achievement seem primitive by comparison. These weren't just advanced tools. They were the products of a civilization that had solved fundamental questions about the nature of reality, consciousness, and the structure of space-time itself. Yet perhaps the most unsettling aspect wasn't the technology's impossible capabilities, but its obvious purpose. Every device, every system, every quantum matrix had been designed with one clear objective: to preserve knowledge and maintain technological continuity through the coming catastrophic transformation of the planet. The ancient civilization had known exactly what was coming, and they had prepared technologies specifically designed to survive what modern science was only beginning to comprehend. The deeper the research teams delved into the technology, the more apparent it became that they were dealing with something beyond mere scientific advancement. These devices weren't just sophisticated machines. They were the product of a civilization that had achieved a fundamental understanding of reality itself. Dr. Valdez discovered that the gravitational manipulation systems could theoretically be scaled up to influence planetary mechanics, while the energy harvesting technology could potentially tap into forces that existed at the quantum vacuum level. "We're not just looking at advanced physics," Dr. Kessler reported in her final classified briefing. "This technology suggests they understood consciousness as a fundamental force of the universe, equal to gravity, electromagnetism, and nuclear forces." The crystalline computers aren't just processing data, they're interfacing with the information substrate that underlies physical reality. The most haunting discovery came when Dr. Blackwell's team realized that many of the devices were still actively monitoring Earth's magnetic field fluctuations, solar radiation patterns, and deep space gravitational anomalies. After 750,000 years, the technology was still gathering data, still calculating, still preparing for something. But the quantum matrices held one final secret that would transform their understanding of who had built this impossible technology. Hidden within the deepest data layers were references to the Keepers, beings who had transcended the limitations of normal human lifespan and had dedicated themselves to preserving knowledge across the cyclical catastrophes that periodically reset planetary civilization. The technology hadn't been built by a lost civilization. It had been built by humans who had found a way to survive beyond the boundaries of normal existence, watching and waiting through the ages to guide the next cycle of human development through the approaching transformation. But to understand who these keepers were and whether they might still be among us, we must venture deeper into the quantum records where the line between technology and consciousness becomes dangerously unclear. Dr. Luna Garrett found herself staring at holographic data that challenged every assumption about human mortality. The quantum records spoke of individuals known as the Keepers, beings who had somehow transcended the normal boundaries of human lifespan, living through multiple polar shift cycles to serve as bridges between successive civilizations. These weren't mythological figures or extraterrestrial entities. The genetic markers clearly identified them as human, yet their recorded lifespans stretched across tens of thousands of years. "Look at these biological readings," whispered Dr. Sage Whitman, the team's geneticist, her voice filled with awe and disbelief. The quantum matrices contain detailed DNA profiles showing cellular regeneration patterns that we've never seen before. These individuals appear to have achieved biological immortality through technologies that manipulated fundamental aging processes at the molecular level. The records painted a picture that defied comprehension. A select group of humans who had chosen to become guardians of knowledge, dedicating themselves to ensuring that each cycle of civilization could rebuild from the foundations of the previous one. They weren't rulers or gods demanding worship. They were teachers, librarians, and shepherds of human potential, working in the shadows to guide species development across geological timescales. Dr. Garrett traced the holographic genealogies with trembling fingers, watching as generation after generation of keepers maintained their vigil through ice ages, polar shifts, and the rise and fall of entire civilizations. Their role was profoundly selfless: to remember what others would forget, to preserve what others would lose, and to prepare for what others couldn't imagine. But the most unsettling revelation was yet to come. Evidence suggesting that some of these immortal guardians might still be alive. The quantum matrices revealed technologies that made the immortality of the keepers not just possible, but inevitable. Dr. Whitman discovered detailed records of cellular regeneration protocols that operated at the quantum level, rewriting DNA telomeres with each cellular division to prevent aging. But this wasn't simple life extension. It was complete biological transformation, allowing human consciousness to persist across timescales that spanned entire geological epochs. These aren't just longevity treatments, Dr. Garrett explained to her encrypted research logs. The keepers underwent fundamental alterations to their neural architecture, expanding memory capacity and processing power to levels that allowed them to retain coherent personalities across hundreds of centuries. They became living libraries capable of storing and accessing the accumulated knowledge of multiple civilizations. The records showed that becoming a keeper was not a privilege, but a sacrifice of almost unimaginable magnitude. These individuals had voluntarily abandoned normal human existence, relationships, family, the comfort of mortality, to serve as eternal guardians of human potential. They watched civilizations rise from primitive settlements to advanced societies, only to see them destroyed by the cyclical polar shifts, then begin the process again with the survivors. Dr. Zara Holloway, the team's anthropologist, studied the social structures described in the quantum records with growing fascination. The keepers operated in small groups, never more than 12 individuals active during any given cycle. They integrated into developing civilizations as advisors, teachers, and occasionally as mysterious benefactors who appeared at crucial moments to provide essential knowledge or technology. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of their existence was the psychological toll described in the deeper quantum layers, the weight of watching humanity repeat the same mistakes across millennia. The quantum records contained fragmentary historical references that sent chills through the research team. Dr. Holloway discovered mentions of keepers appearing throughout recorded history as influential figures whose true nature had been forgotten or mythologized. The record spoke of advisors to ancient Egyptian pharaohs who possessed impossible knowledge of astronomy, mysterious teachers in ancient Greece who understood principles of physics that wouldn't be rediscovered for millennia, and enigmatic figures in Renaissance Europe who seemed to anticipate scientific breakthroughs decades before they occurred. These aren't legends, Dr. Garrett realized with growing unease. The quantum matrices are showing us that human history has been quietly guided by individuals who possessed knowledge from previous civilizations. Every major leap in human understanding, agriculture, mathematics, medicine, astronomy, may have been nudged along by keepers sharing carefully selected fragments of ancient wisdom. The records revealed the delicate balance the keepers maintained. They could guide and advise, but never reveal their true nature or the full scope of their knowledge. To do so would risk either worship, which would corrupt the natural development of human society, or fear, which could lead to persecution and the destruction of the very knowledge they sought to preserve. Dr. Whitman made the most disturbing discovery while analyzing contemporary genetic database. "I've been cross-referencing the keeper DNA markers with modern population samples," she reported, her voice barely above a whisper. There are 12 individuals currently alive on Earth who show genetic signatures consistent with the longevity modifications described in the quantum records. The implications were staggering. The keepers weren't just historical figures. They were still among us, still watching, still waiting for the next polar shift that their ancient calculations indicated was rapidly approaching. The final quantum records revealed the current mission of the keepers with chilling clarity. Dr. Garrett discovered encrypted data streams that were actively being updated, not from the ancient Antarctic facility, but from locations around the globe. The keepers were monitoring modern civilization's progress with the same quiet vigilance they had maintained for hundreds of millennia, preparing for their most crucial intervention yet. They're not just preserving knowledge anymore, Dr. Holloway realized as she analyzed the contemporary data patterns. They're actively preparing modern humanity for the coming polar shift. Look at these technological development patterns. Advances in renewable energy, quantum computing, genetic engineering, space technology. It's as if someone has been subtly guiding our scientific progress toward the tools we'll need to survive the transformation. The records indicated that the keepers had learned from previous cycles. This time, instead of simply preserving knowledge for post-catastrophe recovery, they were attempting something unprecedented, preparing humanity to potentially survive the polar shift itself. The advanced technologies being developed in the 21st century weren't random innovations. They were carefully guided preparations for a planetary transformation that most of humanity didn't even know was coming. Dr. Whitman's final analysis sent shockwaves through the team. The 12 individuals with keeper genetic markers, they're not random people. They're positioned in key scientific, technological, and governmental positions around the world. We're looking at a coordinated effort spanning decades to prepare our civilization for something that will occur within our lifetimes. But to understand the full scope of their preparations, the research team would need to venture deeper into the Antarctic complex, where the quantum records spoke of a vast metropolitan facility that served as the operational headquarters for humanity's immortal guardians, a city beneath the ice that had been continuously inhabited for 750,000 years. Dr. Quinn Ashford stood before the most comprehensive ground-penetrating radar display ever assembled, watching as layer upon layer of architectural complexity emerged from beneath the Antarctic ice. What they had initially thought was a single facility was revealed to be something far more extraordinary. An entire metropolitan complex, spanning hundreds of square kilometers, with structures that defied conventional understanding of urban planning and architectural physics. "The scope is beyond anything we imagined," whispered Dr. Iris Caldwell, the team's urban archaeologist, her voice filled with reverence as she studied the three-dimensional mapping data. "We're looking at a city that makes New York look like a small town. Residential districts, manufacturing centers, research facilities, transportation networks, all perfectly preserved beneath the ice for 750,000 years. But it was the city's layout that truly took their breath away. Dr. Phoenix Langley, brought in as a specialist in ancient astronomy, discovered that every major structure was positioned according to stellar coordinates that matched the sky from 750,000 years ago. The entire metropolis was a massive astronomical instrument, its buildings serving as reference points for cosmic observations that spanned geological timescales. This isn't just urban planning, Dr. Ashford realized as he traced the geometric patterns on his display. The city's design follows principles we're only beginning to understand in quantum mechanics. It's as if the architects knew that consciousness and physical reality operate according to the same fundamental mathematical relationships. The deeper they probed, the more apparent it became that they weren't just looking at a city, they were looking at a three-dimensional equation carved into the landscape itself. Dr. Caldwell's architectural analysis revealed patterns that challenged fundamental assumptions about the relationship between built environments and human consciousness. The city's districts were arranged in spiraling formations that matched the mathematical sequences found in natural phenomena. The sun ratios that governed seashell, growth, galaxy formation, and the structure of DNA itself. But these weren't coincidental similarities. The quantum records indicated that the architects had deliberately designed the metropolis to resonate with the frequencies of human brainwave patterns. "Look at these residential quarters," Dr. Langley called out, pointing to clusters of structures that seemed to pulse with an inner logic. The spacing between buildings follows the golden ratio, but more than that, the proportions are designed to optimize specific neural oscillations. Living in this city would literally alter consciousness, enhancing cognitive abilities and expanding awareness. The most remarkable discovery came when Dr. Ashford realized that the entire metropolitan layout was a massive geometric mandala, a three-dimensional representation of quantum field interactions. Streets curved in perfect spirals that matched electron orbital patterns, while the central districts formed crystalline structures that mirrored the quantum matrices they had discovered in the storage facilities. "This is beyond architecture," Dr. Caldwell whispered, her voice filled with awe. "They built a city that functions as a consciousness amplification device. The very act of living here would have enhanced human cognitive capabilities, perhaps explaining how the keepers achieved their extended lifespans and expanded mental abilities. But the most profound realization was yet to come. evidence that the city had been designed not just to enhance consciousness, but to prepare its inhabitants for a fundamental transformation of human potential. The quantum scanning revealed that the metropolis was still active. Deep beneath the ice, energy coursed through crystalline conduits that formed a vast neural network connecting every building, every district, every structure, into a unified consciousness grid. Dr. Ashford's instruments detected faint but unmistakable signs of habitation: atmospheric processing systems maintaining breathable air, temperature regulation keeping certain sections at comfortable living conditions, and what appeared to be hydroponic facilities, still producing food after hundreds of millennia. "Someone is still living down there," Dr. Langley announced, her voice barely steady as she studied the biosignature readings. The quantum matrices showed 12 distinct life patterns distributed throughout the residential districts. The metabolic signatures matched the enhanced human physiology described in the Keeper records. The city's design became even more extraordinary when they realized its true purpose. Dr. Caldwell discovered that the entire metropolitan complex was constructed as a massive meditation and consciousness expansion facility. The geometric patterns, the crystalline architectures, the astronomical alignments, everything worked together to create an environment where human consciousness could interface directly with the quantum substrate of reality itself. This explains how the Keepers achieved their abilities, Dr. Ashford marveled as he studied the city's harmonic resonance patterns. Living in this environment would gradually alter human neural architecture, expanding cognitive capacity, enhancing intuitive abilities, and eventually allowing direct consciousness interface with quantum information fields. They didn't just build a city, they built a transformation chamber for human evolution. But the most unsettling discovery was the evidence that this transformation was accelerating, as if the city itself was preparing for something momentous, something that would require its inhabitants to achieve capabilities beyond even their current extraordinary abilities. The final quantum scans revealed the true scope of what lay beneath the ice. Not just a city, but a living organism of crystalline consciousness that had been growing and evolving for 750,000 years. Dr. Ashford discovered that the metropolis was capable of self-modification, restructuring its architecture in response to changing needs, and expanding its consciousness enhancement capabilities with each polar shift cycle. "The city is preparing for the next transformation," Dr. Caldwell observed as she studied the real-time architectural changes occurring in the deepest levels. These modifications aren't random. They're specifically designed to help its inhabitants survive and guide humanity through the coming polar shift. The Keepers aren't just preserving knowledge anymore. They're evolving into something that can actively influence planetary events. The quantum record showed that with each cycle, the Keepers had grown more powerful, their consciousness expansion facilitated by the ever-evolving metropolitan environment. They had transcended simple immortality and achieved something approaching divine awareness. The ability to perceive and influence reality at the quantum level, to see across time and space with a clarity that allowed them to guide the development of entire civilizations. Dr. Langley made the final, chilling discovery in the city's central archives: detailed plans for making contact with surface humanity when the polar shift reached critical proximity. The Keepers were no longer content to guide from the shadows. They were preparing to reveal themselves and offer humanity a choice: evolution or extinction. But such revelations would never reach the public, because forces more powerful than scientific curiosity had already set in motion protocols designed to ensure that some secrets remained buried forever, regardless of their potential to save or transform humanity. Dr. Ashford received the call at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning that would forever divide his life into before and after. The voice on the encrypted line was calm, professional, and absolutely terrifying in its polite certainty. "Dr. Ashford, this is Agent Cora Brennan from the Antarctic Research Oversight Division. We need to discuss the immediate classification of your recent findings under National Security Directive 847 Alpha. Within 72 hours, the entire research team found themselves bound by non-disclosure agreements so comprehensive they couldn't even acknowledge the existence of their own work. Dr. Caldwell watched helplessly as her life's research was systematically erased from university databases, while Dr. Langley discovered that his funding had been redirected to projects of higher strategic priority. "They're not just classifying our findings," Dr. Ashford confided to his encrypted personal journal. "They're making it as if we never existed. My security clearance has been revoked. My academic credentials are under review, and I've been informed that any attempt to discuss my Antarctic work will result in charges under the Espionage Act." The official explanation was always the same: national security concerns and the need to prevent public panic. But whispered conversations between the displaced scientists revealed a more disturbing truth. Agent Cora Brennan, in an unguarded moment, had let slip the real concern. The discovery threatens the fundamental narrative of human progress. If people knew that we're not the pinnacle of civilization, that we're potentially facing extinction while superior beings watch from the shadows. The implications went far beyond scientific discovery. They struck at the heart of every institution that depended on humanity's belief in its own primacy. The pressure tactics employed by the Oversight Division were sophisticated and relentless. Dr. Caldwell found herself subjected to weekly security interviews, where agents questioned not just her research methods, but her personal relationships, her financial history, and her psychological fitness for continued scientific work. "They're not trying to silence us," she confided to Dr. Ashford during one of their carefully orchestrated chance encounters. "They're trying to destroy our credibility so thoroughly that even if we did speak out, no one would believe us." Dr. Langley's experience was even more disturbing. His tenure at the university was quietly reviewed, his previous publications scrutinized for methodological irregularities, and his graduate students mysteriously transferred to other programs. When he attempted to contact colleagues about the Antarctic findings, he discovered that his emails were being intercepted and his phone calls monitored. The most insidious part, Agent Brennan had explained during one of her unguarded moments, is that the scientists themselves begin to doubt what they've seen. When every institution tells you that your observations are impossible, when your career and reputation are systematically demolished, the human mind starts to protect itself by accepting the official narrative. The suppression wasn't limited to the research team. Independent verification attempts by MIT and CERN were quietly shut down through budget, relocations, and personnel transfers. Dr. Orion Blackwell found himself reassigned to theoretical projects of higher strategic value, while his quantum physics team was disbanded and scattered across different institutions. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of the suppression protocol was the realization that it wasn't driven by a single government or agency. This was a coordinated international effort that transcended national boundaries. The deeper motives behind the suppression became clear when Dr. Ashford discovered classified communications between various world leaders discussing the Paradigm Preservation Initiative. The documents, leaked by a sympathetic whistleblower, revealed that the Antarctic discoveries weren't just being suppressed for national security. They were being buried to prevent the complete collapse of modern civilization's foundational myths. If the public learns that human civilization is cyclical, that we've risen and fallen before, that there are beings among us who remember previous iterations of our society. One classified memo read, "The psychological impact could be catastrophic. Economic systems based on perpetual growth, religions promising unique human salvation, political structures claiming evolutionary progress, all of it becomes meaningless." Dr. Caldwell obtained evidence that major financial institutions had been briefed on the discoveries and were actively working to prevent any information that might suggest humanity's current technological civilization was temporary or vulnerable. The stock market, they argued, depended on investor confidence in long-term human progress and stability. Even more disturbing were the religious implications. Agent Brennan's leaked reports indicated that major denominations had been consulted about the theological ramifications of discovering that humanity had achieved advanced civilization multiple times, possibly with divine or quasi-divine beings guiding the process. The discovery threatens core doctrines about human uniqueness, divine intervention, and eschatological timelines, one Vatican memo noted. But the most revealing document was a psychological analysis commissioned by a consortium of world governments, concluding that widespread knowledge of the Keeper and the polar shift cycles would likely trigger mass existential crisis, societal breakdown, and possibly civilizational suicide, as humanity grappled with its true position in cosmic history. The suppression protocol had achieved its intended effect with ruthless efficiency. Dr. Ashford found himself professionally isolated, his academic credentials questioned, his research dismissed as fringe archaeology. Dr. Caldwell was quietly transferred to a teaching position at a remote university, while Dr. Langley discovered that his name had been placed on various security watch lists that effectively ended his career in cutting-edge research. But the cover-up went deeper than on individual careers. Agent Brennan's final leaked communication revealed the most disturbing aspect of the suppression. The discovery had reached the highest levels of global power, and the decision had been made that humanity wasn't ready for the truth about its cyclical nature and the approaching polar shift. Maintain societal stability at all costs, the directive read. Better that humanity face extinction unprepared than civilizational collapse from premature revelation. The irony was devastating. The very knowledge that could potentially help humanity prepare for and survive the coming transformation was being actively suppressed by the institution supposedly dedicated to protecting human civilization. The quantum tablets contained technologies and insights that might offer hope for surviving the polar shift, but the psychological impact of accepting that knowledge required acknowledging humanity's true position as a cyclical, fragile experiment in consciousness. Dr. Ashford's final encrypted journal entry captured the ultimate tragedy. They fear that knowing the truth about our cyclical nature will destroy us, so they're ensuring that we remain ignorant enough to be destroyed by the cycle itself. Yet even as the suppression protocols silenced the scientists, the quantum records continued their ancient countdown, and the keepers in their Antarctic metropolis prepared for a revelation that no government classification could ultimately prevent. The approaching convergence of cosmic forces that would force humanity to confront the recurring pattern that had shaped its entire existence. Dr. Silas Thornfield, the quantum archaeologist who had been secretly analyzing the suppressed data, made a discovery that fundamentally altered his understanding of human existence. Working from encrypted files smuggled out of the Antarctic facility, he discovered that the quantum tablets contained a complete historical record spanning not just 750,000 years, but multiple iterations of that same time span. Humanity had not simply risen once and fallen once. It had repeated the exact same developmental pattern 7 distinct times. We're not the first technological civilization, Dr. Thornfield confided to his encrypted research journal, his voice heavy with the weight of cosmic perspective. We're the 7th iteration of the same experiment. Each time humanity develops agriculture, writing, mathematics, science, space technology, and then the polar shift resets everything. Dr. Evelyn Mars, the cosmic physicist who had been independently analyzing the astronomical data, discovered the terrifying precision of the pattern. Each civilizational cycle lasted approximately 107,000 years, from primitive settlement to advanced technology to catastrophic collapse. The rhythm was so exact it could be calculated to within decades, suggesting forces far beyond random geological events. The cycles aren't accidental, Dr. Mars explained in her clandestine research notes. They're timed to our solar system's movement through the galactic plane. Every 750,000 years, we complete a full oscillation through the galaxy's gravitational field, triggering the polar shifts that reset planetary civilization. Humanity isn't progressing. We're spiraling through the same cosmic dance, learning and forgetting the same lessons with each revolution. But the most profound realization was yet to come. The discovery that the pattern itself might serve a purpose beyond human comprehension. Dr. Thornfield's analysis revealed the haunting consistency of each civilization's development. Every cycle began with scattered hunter-gatherer societies gradually discovering agriculture around river deltas. Within 15,000 years, they developed writing systems, mathematical concepts, and astronomical observations. By 30,000 years, they achieved metallurgy, engineering, and complex social structures. The pattern continued with mechanical innovations around 45,000 years, electrical technologies by 60,000 years, and quantum manipulation capabilities approaching the 100,000-year mark. Just before the polar shift reset everything. It's not just similar development, Dr. Mars observed as she cross-referenced the cycles. It's identical development. Each civilization rediscovers the same scientific principles in the same order, makes the same technological breakthroughs at the same intervals, even makes the same philosophical and artistic discoveries. We're not just repeating history. We're following a predetermined script. The quantum tablets revealed that each cycle's final civilization achieved roughly the same level of advancement before the reset. They developed space travel, genetic manipulation, consciousness enhancement technologies, and began to understand the cyclical nature of their existence. Some, like the current 7th iteration, even discovered evidence of previous cycles. But none had ever successfully transcended the pattern. Dr. Thornfield made the most disturbing discovery in the deeper quantum layers, evidence that the cycles themselves were not natural phenomena, but designed experiments. The precision is too perfect, he noted in his encrypted files. The timing too exact. It's as if each civilization is a test run, an attempt to see if humanity can evolve beyond its programmed limitations before the next reset. The question that haunted both researchers was whether their own discovery represented genuine breakthrough or simply another predictable step in the cosmic algorithm. The deeper quantum records revealed a cosmic perspective that challenged every assumption about humanity's purpose in the universe. Dr. Mars discovered astronomical data indicating that Earth's cyclical civilizations were not unique. Similar patterns existed on dozens of worlds throughout the galaxy, each following the same 750,000-year rhythm, each producing intelligent species that rose and fell with clockwork. Precision. We're part of something vast, Dr. Thornfield realized as he studied the galactic survey data embedded in the quantum matrices. Each world serves as a laboratory for consciousness development. The cycles aren't punishment or accident. They're cultivation. Something is using planetary civilizations to evolve intelligence across cosmic timescales. The record suggested that the keepers weren't just preserving human knowledge, they were gathering data for entities that operated on galactic scales. Each civilization's achievements, failures, discoveries, and destructions were carefully documented and transmitted beyond Earth's solar system. Humanity's repeated rise and fall was feeding information into a vast network of intelligence that spanned the galaxy. Dr. Mars made the most humbling discovery of all. The quantum tablets contained communications from other worlds, other species that had undergone identical cycles of development and reset. The messages, translated through quantum frequency patterns, revealed that consciousness itself was being refined through repetition, each cycle producing slightly more aware, more capable beings than the last. "We're not trapped in cycles," she wrote in her final encrypted notes. "We're being evolved through them." Each iteration of human civilization pushes consciousness a little further, develops new capacities, explores different paths. The resets aren't endings. They're course corrections in a cosmic experiment designed to produce something beyond our current understanding. But if this was true, then the approaching polar shift represented not just another catastrophe, but a crucial test of whether humanity had finally evolved enough to transcend the pattern that had defined its entire existence. The final quantum records contained the most profound revelation of all. Evidence that previous iterations of human civilization had reached this same moment of understanding, this same crossroads between repetition and transcendence. Dr. Thornfield discovered that several past cycles had achieved awareness of the pattern, had discovered the keepers, had even attempted to prepare for the coming polar shift. But each time the cycle had reset as predicted. The difference this time, Dr. Mars noted in her concluding analysis, might be the scope of our technological development. Previous civilizations achieved consciousness expansion individually, through meditation, through direct interface with the quantum tablets, through guidance from the keepers, but we've developed technologies that could theoretically enhance consciousness on a species-wide scale. The quantum matrices suggested that the cosmic experiment was approaching its culmination. 7 cycles of human development had produced incremental advances in consciousness, each building upon the last through the preserved knowledge of the keepers. The current civilization represented the most advanced iteration yet. The first 2 developed global communication networks, quantum computers, genetic engineering, and consciousness-altering technologies simultaneously. Dr. Thornfield's final encrypted entry captured the ultimate question. Are we witnessing the natural progression of the experiment, or have we finally reached the breakthrough point? The approaching polar shift will either reset us once again, or it will be the crucible that transforms humanity into something capable of transcending the cycles entirely. But the quantum tablets held one more secret, a detailed warning about the specific signs that would precede the next polar shift. Signs that were already manifesting in ways that suggested humanity had far less time to prepare than anyone had imagined. Dr. Amber Voss discovered the last protocol in the deepest quantum layer of the crystalline matrices, a tablet that had remained sealed until specific astronomical conditions aligned to unlock its contents. The timing of its activation was not coincidental. It had been programmed to reveal itself only when the signs of the approaching polar shift became undeniable. As the holographic data materialized before her, Dr. Voss realized she was reading humanity's final warning. "This isn't just historical data," she whispered to Dr. Jackson Reed, the geophysicist who had been monitoring Earth's magnetic anomalies. "It's a real-time countdown. The tablet is actively monitoring current planetary conditions and cross-referencing them with the patterns that preceded every previous polar shift." The last protocol contained a comprehensive checklist of warning signs that would manifest in the decades before the catastrophic event. Accelerating magnetic pole movement, which had increased 600% in the past 20 years. Specific patterns of volcanic activity along precise geological stress points, matching current eruption sequences in the Pacific Ring of Fire. Solar radiation fluctuations that would affect Earth's atmospheric chemistry, already being detected by satellite monitoring systems. But most disturbing of all was the astronomical component, a specific alignment of our solar system with the galactic center that occurred only once every 750,000 years. Dr. Reed's calculations confirmed what the ancient warning had predicted. Humanity was already within the final phase of the cycle. According to these parameters, Dr. Voss announced with barely controlled terror, the polar shift window opens in approximately 50 years and closes within 2 centuries. We're not preparing for a distant future event. We're living in the final countdown of our civilization. Dr. Reed's hands shook as he cross-referenced the quantum data with contemporary scientific observations. Every warning sign described in the last protocol was not only manifesting, it was accelerating beyond the most alarming climate models. The magnetic North Pole, which had moved slowly for centuries, was now racing across the Arctic at in unprecedented speeds, shifting its position by dozens of miles each year instead of the historical few inches. "Look at these seismic patterns," Dr. Voss called out, her voice tight with growing dread. The tablet predicted specific earthquake sequences along the Pacific Rim, Mediterranean fault lines, and the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. When I compare this to recent geological activity, she paused, her face pale as the correlations became undeniable. We've had 73% of the predicted seismic events in the past decade alone. The astronomical data was even more disturbing. Dr. Reed's analysis confirmed that Earth's solar system was approaching the precise galactic coordinate that had triggered every previous polar shift. The gravitational influences from the galactic center were already affecting our planet's magnetic field, creating the instabilities that would eventually cascade into complete axial reorientation. But perhaps most chilling was the discovery that the last protocol wasn't just a warning. It was a selection mechanism. The quantum tablet was actively monitoring global communication networks, tracking humanity's awareness of the approaching crisis, measuring our technological readiness, and evaluating whether our species had evolved enough to survive what was coming. "We're being tested," Dr. Voss realized with mounting horror. "The keepers aren't just preserving knowledge for after the reset. They're determining whether humanity deserves to transcend the cycle this time. The quantum tablet's evaluation criteria were terrifyingly specific. Dr. Reed discovered that the last protocol was measuring humanity across multiple dimensions: technological sophistication, global cooperation levels, environmental stewardship, consciousness evolution, and most critically, our species' ability to accept and integrate knowledge that challenged fundamental assumptions about reality. We're failing most of the benchmarks, Dr. Voss reported as she analyzed the real-time assessment data streaming from the quantum matrices. Global cooperation is declining, environmental destruction is accelerating, and the suppression protocols we've witnessed suggest that humanity's institutions are actively preventing the consciousness evolution necessary for transcendence. The tablet revealed that previous civilizations had faced identical tests during their final cycles. Each had achieved technological advancement sufficient to detect the approaching polar shift, but none had demonstrated the psychological and spiritual maturity necessary to transcend their cyclical limitations. The pattern was devastatingly consistent: knowledge discovered, truth suppressed, civilization reset. Dr. Reed made the most disturbing discovery in the evaluation algorithms. The last protocol was designed to trigger the polar shift early if humanity demonstrated insufficient readiness. But it's not just measuring our progress, he announced with growing alarm. It's actively deciding our fate. If we fail the evaluation criteria, the quantum systems can accelerate the galactic gravitational resonance patterns, triggering the polar shift decades ahead of schedule. The ancient warning had become an ultimatum: evolve or be eliminated. Humanity had perhaps 50 years to achieve what 6 previous civilizations had failed to accomplish: transcending the limitations that had trapped intelligent life in endless cycles of rise and fall. But the final quantum layer held one more revelation that would determine whether hope or despair defined humanity's ultimate destiny. The deepest quantum records revealed the most crucial piece of information. The last protocol contained not just evaluation criteria, but also the blueprint for transcendence. Hidden within the warning was a detailed guide for achieving the consciousness evolution necessary to break the cyclical pattern. The ancient civilization that had created the quantum matrices hadn't just been monitoring. They had been preparing a pathway for their successors to escape the trap that had confined intelligent life for millions of years. "There's a way out," Dr. Voss announced, her voice cracking with a mixture of hope and overwhelming responsibility. The quantum tablets contain technologies for expanding human consciousness on a planetary scale, electromagnetic resonance patterns that could theoretically synchronize human neural activity globally, creating a unified field of awareness capable of transcending individual limitations. Dr. Reed's analysis revealed the staggering implications. The consciousness enhancement technologies weren't theoretical. They were actively operational within the Keeper's Antarctic metropolis. The 12 immortal guardians weren't just preserving knowledge. They were preparing to initiate a species-wide transformation that could potentially elevate humanity beyond the cyclical patterns that had trapped previous civilizations. But the quantum records also contained a warning that sent chills through both researchers. The transformation process was irreversible and would fundamentally alter what it meant to be human. Success would mean transcendence. Failure would mean extinction, not just of the current civilization, but of humanity's capacity for future reincarnation within the cosmic cycle. "The choice is approaching," Dr. Voss whispered as she studied the final activation sequences embedded in the last protocol. "And it won't be made by governments or institutions. It will be made by those who have been silently watching from beneath the ice, waiting for the moment when humanity is ready to face its ultimate evolutionary leap." Dr. Sage Winters made the final, most disturbing discovery in the deepest archives of the quantum matrices. The biosignature readings weren't just detecting 12 active life forms within the Antarctic metropolis. They were revealing something far more profound and terrifying. The Keepers weren't simply living beneath the ice. They were existing in a state that transcended normal biological parameters, sustained by technologies that blurred the line between life and something beyond human comprehension. "These aren't conventional life signs," Dr. Winters reported to Dr. Kai Holloway, the consciousness researcher who had been analyzing the neurological data. The quantum scans show brain activity patterns that span multiple dimensional frequencies. It's as if their consciousness exists simultaneously across several layers of reality. The life support systems maintaining the keepers were themselves marvels that challenged every assumption about biological sustainability. Drawing power directly from Earth's magnetic field, the crystalline chambers had maintained perfect stasis for 750,000 years, preserving not just physical forms but expanding and enhancing consciousness beyond anything recognizable as human. They're not sleeping, Dr. Holloway realized as he studied the neural frequency patterns. They're evolved. These beings have transcended individual consciousness and merged into something collective. Something that can perceive and influence reality across cosmic timescales. They've been watching, learning, preparing for this moment. But the most chilling realization was yet to come. The quantum records indicated that the keepers were no longer simply observing humanity's development. They were actively preparing to make contact, to offer the current civilization the same choice they had once faced centuries of millennia ago. The contact protocols embedded in the quantum matrices revealed the scope of what the keepers had been preparing for across hundreds of millennia. Dr. Winters discovered that the Antarctic metropolis wasn't just a preservation facility, it was an invitation chamber designed to facilitate the consciousness merger that would either elevate humanity beyond the cyclical pattern or determine that the species wasn't ready for transcendence. They've been constructing a bridge, Dr. Holloway announced, as he analyzed the neural interface technologies that permeated the crystalline city. Not just between their enhanced consciousness and normal human awareness, but between individual minds and collective intelligence. The entire metropolis is designed to facilitate a species-wide consciousness evolution event. The quantum records revealed that the keepers faced an agonizing choice: remain hidden and allow humanity to face the polar shift alone, potentially resulting in another cyclical reset, or reveal themselves and offer direct intervention that could either transform the species or destroy it entirely. The consciousness merger process was irreversible. Those who underwent the transformation would no longer be recognizably human, but they would possess the expanded awareness necessary to guide civilization beyond its cyclical limitations. Dr. Winters made the most disturbing discovery. In the activation sequences, the keepers weren't waiting for humanity to find them. They were waiting for humanity to choose. The quantum matrices were monitoring global consciousness patterns, measuring collective awareness levels, and when a critical threshold was reached, the contact protocols would automatically engage. "We're not just being watched," she whispered as the implications became clear. "We're being recruited. The question isn't whether the keepers will make contact, it's whether enough humans are ready to accept what they're offering." The critical threshold conditions were more specific than either researcher had imagined. Dr. Holloway discovered that the keepers required not just technological advancement, but evidence of consciousness evolution on a planetary scale. The quantum matrices were measuring collective empathy levels, global cooperation indices, environmental stewardship patterns, and most critically, humanity's willingness to accept knowledge that challenged fundamental assumptions about reality and human supremacy. The threshold isn't about intelligence, Dr. Winters realized as she studied the evaluation algorithms. It's about wisdom. The keepers are waiting for evidence that humanity has evolved beyond the tribal thinking, resource competition, and existential denial that trapped previous civilizations in their cyclical patterns. The records revealed that becoming a keeper wasn't just about individual transformation. It was about accepting responsibility for shepherding consciousness through cosmic timescales. Those who underwent the merger would retain human memories and emotions, but they would also inherit the accumulated wisdom and perspective of beings who had watched civilizations rise and fall across hundreds of millennia. Dr. Holloway made the final, most profound discovery. The keepers weren't offering salvation from the polar shift. They were offering participation in the cosmic experiment itself. "The choice they're preparing to present isn't between survival and extinction," he announced with quiet awe. "It's between remaining trapped in cyclical repetition or joining the network of consciousness that guides evolution across multiple worlds." The transformation would create new keepers who would watch over the next iteration of human civilization should the current one fail to transcend its limitations. They would become the silent watchers for the eighth cycle, carrying forward the dream of eventual transcendence while humanity struggled once again toward awareness. As Dr. Winters and Dr. Holloway completed their analysis of the quantum records, a profound silence settled over their hidden research facility. They had uncovered the ultimate truth about humanity's place in the cosmic order. We were neither alone nor unique, but part of an ancient experiment in consciousness evolution that spanned galaxies and epochs beyond human comprehension. The final quantum transmission contained a message that was both invitation and warning. The watchers have been patient. The cycle approaches its culmination. Those who are ready will be called when the threshold is reached. Those who choose transformation will inherit responsibility for shepherding consciousness across the void between stars. The question that remains is not whether humanity will survive, but whether it will choose to become something greater than human. Dr. Winters closed her encrypted journal with trembling hands, knowing that their discovery would either save or damn the species. Somewhere beneath the Antarctic ice, 12 beings who had once been human continued their eternal vigil, monitoring global consciousness levels, waiting for the moment when enough minds would open to accept the truth about cyclical existence and the possibility of transcendence. The polar shift was coming, as it always had. The choice was approaching, as it always would. But for the first time in 750,000 years, there was a possibility that this cycle might end differently. Not with reset and repetition, but with transformation and transcendence. In the absolute silence of the Antarctic night, the quantum matrices hummed quietly with calculations that would determine the fate of human consciousness. The silent watchers maintained their vigil, patient as ice, eternal as stars, waiting for humanity to answer the ultimate question. Are we ready to become the shepherds of our own evolution, or will we remain forever trapped in the beautiful, terrible dance of rise and fall that defines intelligent life throughout the cosmos? The answer, when it comes, will echo across the galaxy and determine whether humanity joins the eternal watchers or becomes another forgotten chapter in the infinite book of cyclical time.